Hi, it's Wanda here with another Peekaboo doing Heart to Heart. And I'm so glad to be here with you. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about was sometimes when we get linen, we'll have a thread. Do you see that thread? Some people just willfully cut it off. I don't feel we need to. I just take a needle. See, I have one in my hand here. And I weave it through just because I like the feeling that my cutting hasn't impeded the security of something. I don't know how thin that thread might be, where that little thread is, or how far they carry two threads. So I just weave it through, my needle through, and I might skip a line. It doesn't really matter. It's not about following the exact warp and weft of the same line you were in, but it's under, over, right? You repeat that. And it is a little bit finicky, I admit. I'm going to come out here, and then I'm going to try to thread my needle. We'll see how I do. I can push this back a little if I need some leeway. Okay, so I'm going to turn the needle sideways so it's easier for me to thread and hope that I can put that loop through. Loop is always easier than an end, I think. Let's see, you coming through? You going to be my friend? Not this time. I'll have to do it again and use some of my saliva, or spit as my grandchildren like to call it, and I'll put it through. I like to call it that too, actually. We can see where they get it from. And I just put that loop through. Come on, loop. I do have a little tiny fine sweater hook that's used to repair or to make sweater fabric. Sometimes I'll nab that if I can't get it to go through, but I'm determined, and I'm sorry you're having to wait. This is not the main thrust of what we're talking about today, but it is important because our backing holds the integrity of all of our loops. Oh boy. I get the feeling with COVID, I have missed my appointment to see if my eyes have deteriorated. I also tend to have pretty dry eyes, and that does not help with acuity either. 6 years later, should we just pretend that I made it go through? I'm going to try one more time, because I am cussed stubborn. And of course, when it heard how cussed I was, it went right through. Okay, here I go. Now I'm just going to pull it right through there. And now I have nothing but this little fine hair to trim. And I don't mind that at all. So that's what I recommend that you do. Just to keep things without developing holes. It's an easy thing to do. So you can see I have a little feather drawn here. I've been working on feathers quite a bit and thinking about them. And here's the prototype for my feather class I'm going to give on August 28th for the last of my summer series. And all people are welcome to join. You can make any or all of these feathers if you wish. Of course, my classes all have aftercare, so I'm going to be going over several different types of techniques you can employ to have soft and hard edges. And you're going to pick your own colors, and of course I give you all instructions and hints about that, and there's lots of little tips that I'm going to give you about working with color to make something. So I am going to make the shaft of the feather, and it's kind of a shaded shaft, right? One side can be darker than the other, so I'm going to start about here, and I have fine cut and I have thicker cut fabric too that I'm going to use. I'm going to put the dark side of this strip to the outside. Now this heart to heart is all about where you start and where you end up. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it is really what it's about. We kind of have to know where we want to go so we know where to start. Like, let's say we need some fancily dyed wool to create this feather. Well, in that case, I better know how to dye and get into the dye pots. So I'm going to start up here with this end, and you can see it has a little bit of pink in it. And Some people pay no mind to these things, but I think it makes an important difference to how interesting your thing or your object that you're hooking looks. So now I've run into this line and I want to go sideways down the side. I don't want it to be too much thicker, but a little thicker and lighter as it moves down. And then I have the tip, and as it's going down, it's getting narrower and narrower. So sometimes I try with my actual cutter to cut something really narrow, and sometimes I'll just take some threads off if it's really thin fabric, and then cut that so that this piece is naturally going to taper down. Do you see that? It's just a few threads at the end. And I love when I say that. It sounds like I'm gonna change the world. I'm going to just pull this up and work my way down so it can get narrow and narrow. I'm probably not gonna reach those fine threads, but you can see it's already getting thinner, appropriately so. Sometimes I recommend that you cut a triangle, but we can't always do that when cuts are so fine. This is number 5 cut. You better mark that in your calendar because we are going to get to those little threads. That's great. Mark it in your calendar because I hardly ever use a fine cut like this, but needs must, and this shaft of the feather needs it. So I have made my shaft. So I knew ahead of time where I wanted to go. I wanted it to be thicker at the top and narrow at the bottom, and if I want to, I can go back and add some to this later if it looks too skinny. Now, that was a number 5 cut because it's narrow, and I'm not going to worry about its apparent unevenness. I'm just going to go with that, and I'm going to think about what I want to have happen with my feather. So I can do 2 sides differently. I can alternate things. I can shade it from the inside out. And I think that's what I'm going to try on this side. Even though I have a line here, I'm going to ignore it on this side. That's the nice thing about drawing these feathers. You can do whatever you want. So here's a case of where you're starting off and where you want to end up. So this is relatively straight. It is curved, but it's a line that does not bulge out, but the edge of this is slightly bulgy. So if I kept making straight lines, I'm not going to be able to naturally follow this line when I get to it. Does everybody understand what I'm meaning? I need to do something here or here that helps the line begin to curve, and I'm going to do it right now. I'm not going to wait. This is called padding. So starting slightly above my curve and going through my curve, so I'll be doing another 2 loops because I want to take it down to where it narrows again. I'm going to put these, this little half line, I call it, or padding. So now when I make the next line, I'm going to start above, and I'm just going to try to hook a curved line around this. And it seems like, oh my goodness, that might be hard, but it isn't. I'm just going to just go naturally out. Let me trim this off so you can see how that looks. I hope you can see well. I tried to position everything so that you could. And I just lean out. Do you see how that's the end of the other one? And I just kind of lean out. Oh, maybe I've never hooked before. All right, so now here I go, following along that same curvy line, the little padding I added, and then when I come down here, I'm going to just naturally curve in. I can do it slowly. If you feel there's too much of a space there, you can go and you can put another one in if you like. I think that's too much of a going in though. So I'll put one in and I'll put this over here. So just naturally it's going in. Now there's a little apparent space there, but I don't think we have to worry too much about that. And I'm not going to go all the way to the bottom because, well, let me see. If I turn this a little, that can help fill up that space. Just show you how that looked. So see how me knowing where I want to go is helping me figure out what to do at the start. So good. Now, I'm going to make this go from light, moving out to a little bit darker. And did you see how I did that? That, my friends, tells all. That tells us how that's going to look. Do we like the look of that? Or do we want to use something more subtle? It's up to us. But I'm going to not be subtle. So now I'm going to start above the other line, and I'm going to work my way out. I'm going to start one more above. See how I'm making judgments as to how this looks? How something looks is far more important than what you know. So I may think, oh yes, we just start one above and then we follow that exactly, and we march our little soldiers of loops along just as we should. But you know, there might be a sniper, and we have to be careful. So you always want to look around. Are things going the way you want them to? Now, for fun, if I wanted to, I could fill that all up with this color, but I'm going to continue to ignore this line and let this half of the feather go from light to slightly darker, I think. But as you know, I'm making this up as I go along. I think knowing where to start, or where you have started, and knowing where you're going is really important when we're learning too, and to reckon that and realize that every step we take is a step towards our goals, and our goals are really important. You have to have some, otherwise you won't know where you're going. And of course we can have little interruptions, and I have lots of those myself, but you want to have a strong forward thrust, like, you know, in 2022 I want to learn more about design or color or line or anything. Or dyeing, that's a good one to learn too, so that you have more control over your wool. And once you have a goal, you know, knowing where you want to end up, then every decision you make needs to support what you want to have happen. So, you know, I like to say if wishes were bitches, we'd have a team of, you know, nasty girls on our side, because they just don't do anything for us, wishes. I better watch it. So now I have this other color, and I'm saying, oh, they're kind of similar. Maybe that's good, but maybe I want to add a little bit of pizzazz around the outside of this feather. So one of the things I'll want to do is do a little bit of, I forget what people call it, but you're going to see me doing it in a second, and I'll write it in the write-up, where I mesh, that's what it's called. I'm going to mesh these things together so there's not such a difference between them, that they're kind of joined together. Do you see how one kind of sits inside the other? And so that means I have to hook fairly close so those can interleave. I should have put my cover on, because I'm getting poked pretty good. Here's a piece of wool I can set here. That'll help me get a better leverage. Okay, so I'm going to continue doing this so that that's more, one has gone over into the physical territory of the other, and it keeps the edge slightly softer. That's one of the tricks I'm going to be teaching you more about in our feather class. It's going to have 2 sessions because there's so many different things I want to show you, and they're all fantastic tricks to apply with color no matter what you're hooking. They're going to be really great. So 2 sessions, 1 week, and then 1 Saturday, and then skip a week and the following Saturday, so that we're not going over into Labor Day weekend. Now, just by happenstance, I've had 2 rows of every one, but this is where I need to start this one because there's no drawing up there anymore. I'm just going to raise it up 1 higher, because that's what I usually like to do, because the end doesn't carry as much weight as the double strip. Now I no longer need to mesh, so I'm not going to, because I don't want to put the pressure on my backing that meshing creates. I wasn't ready to mesh when I put the first row in, this row here of the tan. So I had to kind of squish it in, but that's another case of me, you know, I should have thought about where do I want to end up, and I would have left more room for meshing to transpire. Sometimes when I'm really making something that has to go in a show or that's important, I will go back and take this row out so that I'm not overtaxing my my backing, but you know what? I often don't as well because I'm a person of the moment. So there is one side of my feather done. Now, let's see what else we can do. Now, I really love this color in that feather. Really like it. The thing about feathers is they are all kind of speckly anyway, so it's interesting when we follow those things along. So now you can see I have a line here. I am going to hook this color completely all in here. It's like the most boring color of all, but that's what I'm going to do. And this time, I'm not going to follow along because I'm not shading moving out. Although there is quite a curve there. So I was doing some little bit of hooking like this, but when I never think it's a good idea because I can't go nearly as fast or as accurately as I can when I'm going this way and making my work using my palm of my hand and my whole arm rather than just my wrist, which my wrist is a little bit of a poop head anyways. But I could also, if I wanted to, did I just take you out of view? Here, let me tip that back up again. I could also stripe these. They're alike, so I could follow one after the other just to make a subtle stripe pattern. We're not following any real bird feather. We're just making something beautiful, I hope. That was what I was setting off to do, was make something beautiful to look at. So I'm stopping here because this is like a break in the feather, and I don't draw those from the edge because I find it difficult, just like I find it difficult to draw Christmas trees the same on both sides. And I reckon that about myself, so I make little differences or little, you know, do little things to compensate for that. So I just don't worry about it because when we're hooking, if there's a line there, no one will know at the edge because it'll all be covered up. So now I'm putting the stripes in. Let me check the time. Well, I've already been doing this for 20 minutes, and I don't know if you're nearly going into a coma or not. But I thought to make this approximately a 25-minute video. Probably half the time taken up was because I was threading my needle. I mean, if we want to talk about knowing where we're going, where we are and how to get there, and just the very fact of learning. I think sometimes we have really high expectations for ourselves and we think, oh, I'm just going to do this and it's going to turn out perfectly just like the one I see, and I'm going to this and it's going to be great. But then when we make something, and this might be a good example of that, it doesn't turn out quite as nicely as we thought it might. And it can be a big disappointment to us to not have things turn out, because we've had high expectations and we don't understand that where we start and where we're going and then where we end up, there's many steps between. And it never does us or holds us in good stead if we're comparing ourselves to others, I don't think. I've studied color for a long time, and not in a scholastic way, although I had eventually done that. I studied color with its interactions and how it behaved in my work. And I had to do a lot of work to have that prosper. And that took a lot of time, but it's held me in really good stead because I really feel strong and powerful about the use of color. It's not something I feel wishy-washy about. I know, which is such a great feeling. I know what's going to happen. And that includes in the dye pots too. I can make a pretty great guess about what's going to transpire. So now I've got this top part done, and I think it's a pretty handsome feather so far. So let's cut this and cut our other ends off so we can see what else needs to happen. So one of the things I want to think about is I have light over here, and it's standing out a little bit, and I don't think I really want it to stand out that much, so I'm thinking I'm going to put light down at the tip of this feather. It's not unusual to have light at the end of a feather, and I'm going to use, I think I'm going to use this for the dots in it. You can see it'll show up pretty well, and it also has some orange in it and some red, which will harken back to this color here. So let's pop some little dots in here, and I'm not going to be too fancy about going around in a circle. I'm just going to let the loop's natural way make the little, they're often little rectangles, to be honest with you, in a feather. I also cut the heads off loops. You just saw me do it there because I don't want to be, you know, I often have trouble with my scissors not cutting all the way through, and I don't want to be bothered with that right now. So these little loops don't need to be anything fancy or tidy or even clean. They're just a little dot. You don't have to go to a lot of work, and you can see I'm turning them too, just to make them fit the side where I want them to fit. And they don't always have to be the same size either. So I'm going to put the light around that. So what's going to happen in this other space here? Well, as you know, I was super pleased about how this looked. So let's see what happens here. In which direction should I go? So that's another thing about a feather. I think I'm going to make bars, right? So I'm going to have, I'll make a stripe here like this. But when I make bars, I usually use 2 rows because it just makes a better impact. I hope that you're finding this feather hooking fun, and I hope that you'll join me because, like, I love geometrics, of course, but making these, I'll call them unnatural feathers, although they're based on the studies I have made of real feathers. It's a lot of great stuff to do. Now I'm making the little split because I'm having another little split of my feather there. And so let's see what happens when I put the dark up there to be the other part of the bar. Might be too much, might not be enough. We'll see. No, I'm probably not going to finish this all up, but I just want you to see what that's going to look like. So there's one strip, and there's room for another. And I'll be bringing my light back down into the tip. I'll just do a little bit of it too to show you. So I have room for another 2 rows. So I'll have another row of this here, and then another row of this here. And I'm going to fill up the tip with white, and I will take a photo to show you what it looks like. It could be at the end I don't care for the light, in which case that happens a lot because of course I don't like light colors at all. They're not my wheelhouse, and I don't dig them. But sometimes I just have to bear with me because once again, you know, this is where I am. I don't like white, but if my work needs white or light in there, then I'm going to have to use it. I can't be just totally discounting it because I don't care for it. I have to think about, where am I heading? What do I want at the end? That's far more important than me getting my own way about color. And I run into this quite a bit where people will, you know, just inherently not like a color, just as I do. And it's really because they can't use it, spoils their work, as I like to say. just like you would spoil a child. You know, you got to have some discipline. Let me see. I'll just go around a few more times. I'll go around this one so we can get an idea of the effect that's going to have. And I'll finish it off camera. And you've been like super great to stick with this. I'll be opening the feathers class to join pretty soon. And that's our pattern. I'm just going to show it to you again. And you can do one of those feathers or all of those feathers. And you can make it any size you want to. That was another important thing. If you like that and you wanted to make it bigger, I am all for that. And I support you fully. You can extend and expand that and make it as big as you like. That is the bird's laundry. That's what that pattern's called. Yeah. So you can kind of get a feeling how this is looking. I think it's nice. I'm not sure it's like 100% exactly the way I want it to be, but I think it was good for a quick little tour. And I have lots of ways to show you about making hard edges and soft edges too. That was just one of them I showed you today. Okay, let's see if I can just finish it off. Might as well. I jimmer jammed at you now for I don't know how long. 26 minutes, you poor souls. I'm going to tell you to make a cup of tea before you watch this, and I hope it's just get yourself a cookie or something. You're going to need it for the sustenance of watching all this. Just exhaust you with my carry-on. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with how this looks kind of overall. I might revisit my vein color, like my quill color, the, oh my goodness, spine of the feather, whatever the word is for that. And because it's kind of blending in, but perhaps when I get further away from it, it won't be blending in so much. Sometimes they practically disappear, as you know. And now, a bit more of my orange, which I think I threw on the ground. Or maybe I used it all up. I can't believe I did. Oh, here it is. Okay. I wasn't going to use this orange because it seemed bold and not all that pleasant to look at. But I like it, and I'm happy with it, and I like how it looks. And if I wanted to have more of it, I would just invert these rows where I would use this where the orange is and just switch them, because then a lot more of it would show. I'm going to go right down here as far as I can, and I might even, you know, jam some in, because this should go right to the end. There. It's really important that we remember what we're making, and you have to make it look like it's going out to the edge, because in real life it would. I have a little tiny triangle in here to fill up. So there we go. I hope you liked this little thing about where we start and where we end up, and all the little tips you have garnered from it. And I will see you, of course, for Thursday class, and I'm really looking forward to it. Let's do it. Let's get together and have a good class. There we go. Let me tip it up so you can see it better. There. All right, my friends. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for sticking in there. Bye.